The first point is that the build-up to the election was extremely disturbing because it was characterized by a number of very negative behavior related to the campaign. There was quite a bit of violence and thuggery leading up to the election. The social media was used in a very reckless way to present dangerous statements that could have led to a breakdown of peace and order. Leading parties gave directives to their operatives to deliver, as they were saying, 100% of the votes in their polling units. All these created a very toxic atmosphere leading to the elections, and people, it was widely assumed, will be too afraid to come out to vote. However, a number of significant measures were taken to create a level playing ground for elections that will allow citizens to come out and feel confident enough to express their mandate. First of all, we want to commend the National Peace Committee under the leadership of General Abubakar that was able to successfully negotiate a peace accord. Secondly, we want to commend the main traditional ruler in the state, the Oba of Benin, who worked tirelessly to cajole and warn his citizens to keep the peace. We are glad people largely listened to this wise counsel. Thirdly, the President, Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari, assured citizens that the state will do all in its power to ensure free and fair elections. Fourthly, and maybe most important, the citizens of Edo felt that the stakes of the elections were very high and expressed their will to come out and defend their mandate under whatever conditions. All these created an atmosphere in which the elections that were organized were credible, widely accepted, and the results indicate that the outcome was indeed the choice of the voters of Edo State. We believe that after a thorough analysis of our 250 observers deployed all over Edo State and the reports from 18 journalists from the cable newspaper that we deployed to also report on the happenings, that those elections were conducted in conformity with the laws and regulations for the conduct of elections. We therefore believe it's an important positive step in the development of electoral democracy in Nigeria, and that all the stakeholders played their role correctly. In particular, INEC, carried out its role as spelled out in law. The security agencies maintained their neutrality. The political parties largely behaved correctly. Citizens came out and voted. All this for us are positive signs of the march of our electoral democracy.
Ibu and the others, free, credible, and fair elections. While the CDD is drawing attention to that, to show that we are making progress towards electoral integrity, the CDD also feels that it has a responsibility to Nigerians to caution that we do not rest on our oars, to emphasize, as the pre-election atmosphere in Edo clearly shows, there are still serious threats by various actors to the sustainability of democracy in the country. So that as we move ahead, we look back to see where are the snares, where are the minefields that may negatively detract from future elections and setting us back to where we were before. And we just want to draw attention to some of those snares, some of those worrying signals that we should be aware of as we move ahead, and that some of the things we need to do, therefore, is to see to what extent electoral reform can be compacted, can be undertaken to deal with the threats that those, what we call those undercurrents of our political economy, of our history of electoral degeneration in this country. The first one, which was clearly displayed during the Edo elections, and which in fact caused the worry that people felt about the election, is the continuing lack of internal democracy, particularly in the selection of candidates for high political offices in the country. So I think we need to find ways of moderating this, to finding how can we in fact ensure that the atmosphere that surrounds the conduct of party primaries are conducted in ways that also conform to the wider concern with the integrity of the electoral process in the country. Political parties cannot benefit from efforts to sanitize the national electoral political process to ensure its credibility without also doing something themselves to reflect that wider concern at the national level with the credibility of elections. So how political parties conduct their internal affairs, and particularly the selection of their party candidates for high political offices, must be a matter of continuing concern with us. And I think this is somewhere where, as Nigerians, as the electorate, we must find ways of confronting the political parties to conform with party requirements for internal democracy. The second point we need also to emphasize as troubling, and we need to avoid as we move ahead, is the zero-sum attitude towards political competition, and the extent to which political parties are prepared to use the power of incumbency for partisan political advantage in ways that taint the credibility of elections. I think this is also very, very important. And the significance of Edo in this respect is the apparently clear the apparently clear demonstration we have that the power of incumbency was not as massively employed for this election as was the case in previous years. So, and I think in looking forward, therefore, how do we prevent, what do we need to do to prevent this use of power of incumbency? We need to see why is the Edo case an example? Why is it an exemption? So as we move ahead and we say, well, you know, we praise the police for not behaving in partisan manner. We need to interrogate why is this the case? Is there a certain reason behind it why it was not the case? And is it related, for example, to internal party political processes going ahead towards 2023? The next point I want to make, is the proliferation of unethical strategy of campaigning, which creates, which in fact taints the electoral process. The use of fake news, the use of hate speech, and so on and so forth. I think this was very, very clear in the process leading up to the Edo elections last week. The other point that we need to make going forward is that we talk of vote buying, of the monetization of the political process, and so on and so forth. I think an underlying structural problem is the huge human development deficits in the country that create this kind of environment of poverty, of unemployment, which the political parties are exploiting in terms of trying to buy their way through the political process. So I think we need again to, moving forward, to see how can we in fact ensure not just the spirit, but also the letter of Chapter 2 of our Constitution, which is essentially meant to create human development as a prerequisite for peace and order in the country, must be sustained. We cannot just say, people are being bought, people are buying, people are offering self, and the application of ICT to enhance the integrity of the electoral process. It has done that, but the environment is still very, very hostile and is creating a huge constraint for INEC to continue on this important mission that it is doing to sanitize the political process. And I think in this respect, we must commend INEC for the reform that made it so easy to compute and upload election results in ways that will make it, in fact, difficult for anyone to try and alter election figures. I was impressed that by 11 p.m. on Saturday, some news media, based on what was on the INEC portal, already predicting projecting results without undermining the electoral law. I mean, it's what happens in the U.S. By the time people have voted within by midnight on election in the U.S. and in most other places, you can see in terms of projections, people are making projections based on results that have been validly declared by the electoral body. So I think this is something that is very, very important, and we hope that the INEC will go forward and go on with the attempts to introduce e-voting. I mean, the e-voting and the e-portal that they tried in Nasarawa. So I think this is just what we want to say. But
voter turnout in our elections, and this declining voter turnout can be adduced to the earlier issues Professor Jinadu and Professor Ibrahim had actually raised. So if you look at the Edo election, in the 2003 elections, they had a 78% voter turnout. Now, turnout results for 2003, 2007 are not prided as being extremely credible. 2007 report is, of course, missing, but in 2012, there was a 40.5, which represents 41% voter turnout. 2016, 32% voter turnout. And by 2020, there is a gross decline to 25.2% turnout by our calculation. 25% turnout. So then we start asking ourselves, why is this really happening? And it is happening because of the environment the political class themselves have actually engendered. The fear of violence, the failure of democracy to actually deliver development, the belief in the heart of people that, of course, their vote will not count, which, of course, the introduction of the e-portal, somehow, the result viewing portal have added some credibility to the process. These are very important issues that we have to take forward. Having around 500,000 people, 500 plus, determine the outcome of an election, even when the votes are divided in between, are not good enough. But it also boils on the political class to actually do the right thing so that people can come out and vote. And I think the second very important issue is the non-observance of the COVID-19 protocol during these elections. And I think that we place on the doorstep of both citizens and, of course, some to the electoral management body itself. And we feel that moving forward towards the Ondo elections, INEC has a dual task to ensure that it actually implements that COVID-19 policy, which he herself was actually very proactive enough and one of the first in West Africa to draft such a policy to conduct elections. But a policy is one, implementation is one. And alongside that is also to ensure that there is adequate voter education, not just to approach to the zero-sum politics itself, which is, we proposed no more winner takes all, which of course we have a lot of recommendation from here. And I think a very strong important point here is also to say that most of the recommendations that are in the Waste Panel Committee report and the Inamani report are yet to be implemented. And these are very, very important and critical reform that is actually needed. Aside the pending bills in the National Assembly, we need to have an holistic electoral reform process, aside attitudinal change that can change the nature of policies. And one very important point is also one that talks about enacting legislation to vest the power to deploy state resources and public servants, including the military, police, and other security personnel, in INEC 6 months ahead of the election, as it is done in India. So in the Edo elections, we saw that the abuse of incumbency, both at the national and at the state level, was a strong feature of that elections. And how do we get rid of this? And of course, improving the appointment process, working more with the security forces. These are very, very important recommendations for us. And importantly, I think that it is high time we start linking elections to democracy. The whole essence of going to the polls is so that people can have the delivery of public goods and services, a representative government that you have actually elected. But this government, these elections have not actually led to the delivery of public goods and services to the people. And that again is why you link it to even the vote buying, engagement in violence, and all other incidences that reads our elections. And I think this is a very important point for us. And it's an important point we have actually been making since 2019, that it's not just the delivery of public goods and services to the citizens. These public goods and services, in terms of good roads, also help in improving electoral integrity. So what happens when we talk about the collation process, which is a loose link in our elections, is the dearth of infrastructure in the country. At times, even the late opening of polls is either the bad road, the inability to connect several parts of the state, which are actually responsible for this. So even the political class will have to see this and put it on a table as a to-do if they must win elections free, fair, and credible.
We also want to see in the electoral reform the finance campaign, because as long as some people will privatize and commercialize the nomination process, then it will be difficult for even decent, honest, popular, genuine people to emerge. Because once the whole process is being commercialized, it will be difficult for decent people to actually uphold the registration, of the party nomination. Secondly, the issue of penalty for the election violence. We are so happy that in this last election, just a statement coming from the United Kingdom, European Union, American government had put some sense in some people who, probably ordinarily they will want to test their balance capacity. So it is important that if we are going to have any electoral reform, we deal with issues of people who have perpetually continued to perpetuate electoral violence without being punished. Also, in our recommendation, we also want to recommend that the use of technology must be sustained. If you really want to eliminate election malpractices in this country, you must enhance the technology, use of technology. In other parts of the world, technology is used for election matters, but here people are just not willing to get that done. Then, of course, the composition of the election oversight body. I think it is important. We have made several of these recommendations in the past, and it is also still in the Waste report that there must be political party establishment of political party registration regulation body. That because the way it is now, INEC is saddled with so many work and they are overwhelmed, and therefore we believe that creating this agency or body will lessen the task of INEC to focus on actually conducting election. I think finally, the final point that I just want to make is that the synergy, working relationship, with the security agencies, with the INEC, with the peace, Abdulsalam-led peace committee, had actually, provided positive outcome of this election. I remember we had made with the police, Inspector General of Police, and we can see that that's working relationship with civil society and the the Inspector General of Police personally, and all the commissioners of police hierarchy, they met with civil society and agree and share information, and now we have seen the dividends of that. Of course, working with INEC had also provided us another good working relationship to ensure that everything that has to do with the election is more transparent, and we can now see that relationship is has to be sustained with INEC. And of course the eminent peace makers, Abdulsalam and Reverend Kuka, they had actually broker having peaceful election in Edo. We hope that in the election coming in Ondo, we are going to see more improvements. We are going to see less, trouble that we have, even the little that we have even experienced on this. We hope that the people will not be used to undermine the electoral choice of people. I think it is important that we also give kudos to the president who came out openly to express satisfaction of the election that had happened, which invariably, of course, his candidate lost, but still congratulated the opposition party. If we continue with this, and results are not changed, I believe that our democracy will grow and we will experience less violence in the electoral process.